Hey, good morning, everyone. Glad to have everyone here today for the third day of the Behavior Support Review Committee training series. As Heike said, I'm Rita Cooper. I'm the Western Region Area Behavior Analyst, and we've asked for you to enter, if you want the CEUs, to enter your name, email, and BCBA address, BCBA information in the chat. And then the expectation is that you actively participate in the polling questions. If you have trouble entering that, you can put it in the chat also. And then at the end of the session, to also enter your email and BCBA number, so we can kind of close the loop. And then after that, we'll culminate with, if you've attended all and had the participation, then we will send you your certificate for those 3 CEUs. So that'll be pretty awesome and at no cost. Wow. We will be holding at least at some point in time a workshop to kind of take this to the next level, so we can actually look at a plan and at scoring it. So be on the lookout for that in the future. So with that, if I'm going to hand it over then to my associates, Alantha and Lucas, and I'm of course, the Western Region Area Behavior Analyst, and I'll have my associates introduce themselves and we'll get started. So kick it off to Melantha and then to Lucas.
Good morning. I am Melantha Witherspoon, the Eastern Area Behavior Analyst. Welcome back.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucas Evans. I'm the Central Area Behavior Analyst, and it's good to see everyone back again. All right, let's go ahead and advance the slide. Or can I can do it, can't I? Or can I not? I can. Oh, wow. I should not be trusted with this much power. So this is a continuation from what we talked about last time. So hopefully all of you have attended last time. Otherwise, you'll be very confused. But I'll try to give a little bit of a review. So as you remember from last time, we went into a deeper dive on each element. We talked about what they were, what the components of each element was, and then we gave some examples and non-examples. And just as a kind of like a quick reminder, these examples and non-examples are small statements that contain, if it's an example, all the necessary components that comprise the element, but may look a little odd outside of a behavior support plan. So this is kind of that intermediate step. So being able to recognize examples and non-examples that have all those components of those essential elements, and then the workshop that Rita talked about, which is taking to the next level, is actually kind of incorporating the elements throughout like an actual behavior support plan and being able to still kind of identify those or discriminate whether they're there or not there. So just as a quick refresher about what we're doing here, and I'm going to kind of take us through this first example and we'll get started. So this is for checklist item number 6. Again, we're starting in the middle of the form. And this one is all about how to reinforce behavior that you would like to increase. And this is about how do you do it? So what specific instructions are there for reinforcing behavior? What do you, how often do you do it? So what do you do? How often do you do it? That's a schedule. Is it every single time? Is it on a fixed time interval? Or is it on an interval time? Is it every other performance that you see that you provide reinforcement? How often should people do it? And then what do they do it with, so to speak? So like what is the outcome or the stimuli or the stimulus that you're using as a reinforcer, and why is that? So it's more than just like we're going to say good job after somebody does something that we want. There has to be some reason to believe that saying good job actually means something for this person and will function as a reinforcer. And so this is kind of the callback to that good assessment that we started with element number 1. And I'm not going to go through all of these task list compliance code items, but needless to say, it's how to reinforce behavior, and that we want to reinforce behavior to increase is kind of like the foundation of our entire professional practice. If we truly are about building repertoires and individuals and staff people to support individuals to help people be successful in ways that they care about and that society cares about, we have to use reinforcement. And to use reinforcement, you got to know what to do, how often to do it, and what you're going to use to provide reinforcement. So let's look at some examples and non-examples. So here is an example. And remember, these are written specifically to contain all of the necessary components in the element. And this one is about Steve. So each day that Steve gets up on time and prepares for work in 1 hour or less, staff will take him to Starbucks for coffee on the way to his job. So we're presuming that coffee is reinforcing for Steve. If Steve is like me, then definitely coffee is a super big reinforcer. And so we know specifically how to do it. So we've got instructions here on like what to do to deliver it. We know how often to do it. It's basically every time he meets the contingency requirement, he gets it. And we know what it is. And again, in a behavior support plan, this would be linked back or in the context of the functional assessment. So you would know that this is a reasonable reinforcer or stimulus to use. But in order to make this fit on the screen and not have a multiple paragraph thing, this is what we chose. So this has all the components. This is an example. Another example, so this one's about Jorge. So when he requests an item that is available, staff should retrieve it. If the item isn't available, staff should present 2 related alternative choices for Jorge to choose from, and then let him have those things. So again, this is what to do to reinforce. This one again is presuming that choice making is a reinforcer, which is a pretty safe assumption for most human beings and just people in general. And what to do and how often. So basically, if he asks for it and he can have it, he should always get the item. But if it isn't available, there's an alternative thing to do, an alternative procedure to set up reinforcing choice making in the event that the primary desired item isn't there. So again, we have all of those components that are necessary to kind of know that there's some reinforcement happening in this plan. And here is a non-example. So I'm gonna, before we even get to the challenge question, I'm gonna have people chat in about what they think is missing here. So if at the end of the day there's no physical aggression, then Johnny's gonna get a diet soda. So let's just presume, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that a diet soda is actually a reinforcer for Johnny, and it might be, it would be a reinforcer for me. I don't drink regular soda. But besides that, what is wrong with this example? What's missing? And you guys can chat it in because obviously you can't talk. Well, yeah, so what time of the day? It's not specific, but even more fundamental, what is the behavior being reinforced? No physical aggression isn't the behavior of interest that we want to increase, because going back to Ogden Lindsley's rule of thumb on the dead man's test, a dead man cannot be physically aggressive, so that's really not what we're trying to do. And bonus points, what kind of schedule is this? So what sort of intervention is this? Remember all those different ones? You had the incompatible, you had differential reinforcement of alternative. Yep, it's a DRO, absolutely. Okay, so the thing about DROs is in most cases, they actually aren't reinforcement procedures at all. So there's a really good article by Jonathan Jessel, I think it was in 2016 in Behavior Analysis and Practice, where he kind of goes through all the available literature on DRO schedules and shows that depending on what the situation is and how they're provided, they actually could function as extinction, they could function as punishment, and they maybe are functioning as reinforcement, but not for anything that you are planning to reinforce. So you may get some reinforcement of some behavior, but you don't know what that behavior is, and you're not programming for it. So it really doesn't meet the requirements for a reinforcement procedure, because you aren't actually targeting anything for increase. If you get something that increases, awesome, but you haven't planned for it and you can't predict what it will be. So let's move into a challenge question. So you actually will get to respond this time through the polling feature. It's going to be amazing. So if at the end of the week, no outbursts have occurred, Harley receives bucks to spend at the token store. Is this an example or a non-example? All right, let's see the results. All right, it looks like a few people indicated that it was, yes, it was an example. The majority of folks, 17 out of 28, said that it was not an example, and 8 folks did not answer. So just as a quick reminder, before we go into this specific question, if you are trying to get CEUs for this talk, make sure you do participate in each one of these questions, because that's how we're tracking participation in this, which is the BACB's requirement for earning CEUs, and as part of our ACE standards for doing that. So make sure you're answering those. If you're not here for CEUs, then it's your choice. But the correct answer is definitely no. So there's lots of issues with this example. One is this is another sort of DRO. This is like what I would call like a full interval DRO, or so there's a long period of time. It's targeting non-occurrences. So you're not really actually looking for behavior to increase. And then there's the whole what's probably a token economy. And there's a lot of questions that would have to come to using a token economy. So one, how many bucks? Bucks that are exchangeable for what, when? So there's lots of things that go into this that make me not know specifically how this is actually a reinforcement plan. So one, it's the DRO, and two, there needs to be some more detail about the tokens, because that in and of itself isn't enough information to substantiate having a reinforcement strategy. All right, I'm going to pass it on, and I will advance slides as instructed. So here we go.
All right. Element 7, reactive strategies for behavior target for decrease. So just ensuring that there are instructions in the behavior support plan that tell people what to do when the challenging behavior is present, and that those strategies are likely to minimize reinforcement for the behavior, so that the behavior is not likely to occur. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're going to look at this example. Aggression routinely allows escape from tasks. If aggression occurs, staff should evade or utilize brief manual restraint. After aggression, staff should represent the task. And this will be an exemplar because one, it tells the staff what to do if aggression is present. Two, it also is likely to not reinforcing, it's not likely to allow this person to escape from the task. So it meets all of the elements of, it meets all of the components of element 7. All right, I'm ready for the next example. I love this example. In the past, staff would rush to honor requests following Keith throwing items. Instead, when outbursts of throwing items accompanies requests, staff should say in an empathetic tone, "Let's take a breather," instead. And so this, again, meets all of the components of element 7, because it allows implementers to know what to do once Keith starts throwing items, and it also doesn't allow Keith to access whatever it was he's requesting, because the staff are not honoring the request. They're allowing him to take a breath. And so this would be an exemplar as well. All right, I'm ready for the non-example. Making threats often gets Billy large reactions. When this occurs, staff should remind Billy that such statements are not appropriate. And so this would be a non-example because it is not likely that staff stating to Billy that those statements are not appropriate is going to decrease the undesirable or unsafe behavior from occurring. It does tell staff what to do, but those strategies will not lead to desired outcomes.
Hey, Monica, can I add one thing before you go to the challenge question?
Sure.
Okay. I actually want to ask you also, when you look at this previous example where instead of honoring requests immediately when Keith's throwing items, that staff should say, let's take a breather instead, what sort of intervention would you all call this? You didn't think you were going to get a quiz like this today. I wouldn't call it a DRA. I would call it some sort of timeout procedure. It's a timeout from reinforcement procedure, right? Would you all agree? So in contingent on throwing things, it kind of creates distance between throwing things and when he can make requests that get honored again. Would people agree with that? Well, good call. Take a breather. It could be better defined, but let's say this function as creating distance between making a request and getting it met, contingent on doing something like throwing items. So let's just take that. So it is I would say it is a timeout from reinforcement in that situation. Is that okay to do in our setting? I would say it's absolutely okay to do. It's so what we don't do. So what is prohibited practice in Missouri DD system is seclusion timeout specifically, where you take somebody and not let them leave a room contingent on problem behavior. You aren't doing anything other than just not honoring request in that moment, contingent on them throwing something. You're not moving them. You're not even moving yourself. You're just not doing anything. It's I would call it inclusionary timeout because they're not leaving anywhere. You're just not complying with that request in that moment. Is it a rights limitation? So yes, you can do it, but is it a rights limitation for the person? I would say yes, it could be a rights limitation. That would depend. Okay, so we've got some questions. So it would only be a timeout procedure if the physical act of throwing is reinforcing in and of itself, and you prevented that. Well, so if the throwing, yeah, so absolutely. So if you throw something in the past and that has increased the likelihood that you get your demands met, and then you no longer provide, you actually take away the option to have demands met, then yes, that would be a timeout procedure. And somebody says I'm really struggling with because it seems like programmed restraint. Should we be making plans to include interventions that are based on restraint? Shamika, could you describe a little bit about where you see restraint happening here? Oh, okay. Somebody's helping me. It's supposed to be. Oh, okay. This is the question about this one. So somebody's struggling with this one about yes. Yeah, part of a comprehensive safety crisis plan, which is a requirement for behavior support plans in situations where they're necessary, could include telling staff when they should consider using physical crisis responses, like brief manual restraint. And we absolutely should plan for situations that those things are needed. Staff should be trained on how to do those, and we should have clear guidelines for when those things are necessary. So that is absolutely best practice. We should definitely be planning on what we want staff to do in those situations. And it could absolutely be the case that a brief manual restraint is the most safe thing to do in that moment. Rita, Melantha, did we lose Melantha? Rita, what would you agree?
Yes, I would concur. I mean, that's the option of physical intervention is an option, and especially to guide staff exactly when to use it. I mean, in a safety crisis plan, there should be those elements that ensure the safety of everyone, whether that includes physical intervention or not. It should be a physical intervention, of course, that is approved by the department. So you can't just like use whatever you want. You have to have trained people in that type of intervention, that physical intervention that you're using. So, and yeah, Lucas, Melantha, her computer apparently shut down, unfortunately. I know she's going to try to get back on.
Okay, no worries. All right, so I think I got all the questions. If I miss one, I'm sorry, represent it and I'll go over it. But let's go to the challenge question really quick. So just since we've kind of went on a tangent here. So really what we're looking for here is there a set of strategies, instructions for staff or implementers to use to respond to challenging situations? And whatever it is that they're doing, does it seem reasonable or reasonably likely to minimize reinforcement or eliminate reinforcement for the problem behavior? So does it result in minimal reinforcement, something that's less valuable? Does it result in extinction? What can we do? So let's look at a non-example, or the challenge, sorry. So following physical aggression, Jerome must run laps until he is ready to apologize to, this one didn't get fixed, to whomever he struck. So I know that's written awfully, but after Jerome hits somebody in the face, he has to run laps until he is ready to apologize to whoever he hit in the face. Would you think that this is an example or a non-example? Can we get the polling question? Is it going? It's going. Okay, cool. No, it's not going. Heike, help. There it is. Okay, we've got a few more seconds. All right, so it looks like everybody said this is not an example. Yeah, absolutely. So this would be definitely not an example because it doesn't meet our requirements as far as what's best practice for the BACP standpoint. It isn't ethical. It doesn't meet our professional practice requirements in the state of Missouri, both for licensure and for the CSR. So this is absolutely not an example. So we will move on. And Rita, is this you or is this
Yeah,
me?
it's actually Lucas.
All right, I'll be quiet and I'll advance as instructed.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So our next element is element 8, and that's evaluating the efficacy of the behavioral strategies. So, is what we're doing working? And the components we're looking for is a visual display. How can you do analysis if it's all words? I've seen some ISPs, and I'll use that as an example, although, a visual display would be better, that goes through each and every event that ever happened. I can't tell what's going on. Those are words. Those aren't pictures. And sometimes pictures are better. So we need visual display of the data in a graphed form, hopefully. Contextual variables are present in the display, and we're looking for, phase change lines to see when the baseline was, when medications may have been included or decreased or changed. We're looking at, was the BSP changed? So those relevant contextual variables are present. Clear demarcation, I already included that. And then visual progress is logically related to the strategies of change. Are you measuring the dimensions and the elements that really measure that behavior? If you need to use frequency, if you need to use duration, if we want to know that things are decreasing, how do we know that? The other thing that I think is important to note is that we should have the replacement behavior potentially on the same graph with the targeted behavior. So, and just to kind of, those task list elements I'm not going to go through, but A is essentially measurement, and then H is your measurement section, and then that compliance code, it looks at us making sure we're doing the assessments of the behavior and the data collection appropriately. So those are really key elements. And of course, as behavior analysts, we want to see changes. I mean, we're behavior analysts. We analyze what's going on, and the best way to do that is by graphing what we are doing and seeing what changes in the behavior occur, the targeted behavior and the replacement behavior. So with that, let's move on to the next slide, which is an example. So on here, we've got both the axes are labeled. We've got the dates on one side. We've got the occurrence per day. We've got measurements. It's essentially in black and white. We've got some noted changes when the BSP was implemented, when there was a change. We also know that this is the ongoing progress for this person A, and we have the target behavior identified, and we have the replacement behavior identified, asking for headphones, self-injurious behavior. The assumption is we don't know the background of this, but that, these elements would really be the target and the replacement behavior, so that's there. Let's go on, of course, to the next one. And so what do we see? What elements might be missing? What elements would you like to see? So let's see if we can get some dialogue in the chat box, if we could, please. No baseline, excellent. No phase change lines, super. The other thing is, do we know what's what? Grid lines could be removed. That is an option. The interventions aren't labeled. Excellent, Tammy. Thank you. What's the red line represent? What's the yellow line represent? I don't know. But we know it's progress of the person. Doesn't tell us what we're looking at. Excellent, excellent. Great dialogue. Thank you so much for your response on these. So let's move on. We don't have a whole lot of examples or non-examples, but you guys indicated what was missing. The things aren't, the interventions aren't labeled. There are no baselines. There are no phase change lines. So let's go on to the challenge question and see, is this an example of what we should be looking for? And hopefully we have the polling question going.
Okay, folks, go ahead and enter the response in the chat. Sorry about that. So A for yes or yes, B for no or no. Yeah, Molly, sorry about that. The polling question won't launch for this one. So is this an example or not example?
All right, look at those responses. Everyone is responding B, no.
So specifically, what's missing for this from this one?
I'm sorry, Lucas, what did you say?
I was going to ask somebody to chat in what specifically was missing from this graph.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Thank you so much. Gosh, look at that. Even people who aren't behavior analysts, I know who's responding, are responding with the correct response. You know, labeling things, giving the information in a cohesive manner, and making sure that it's readable and you can see what's going on. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So
we did have a response on there not being gaps between the data paths where the phase change lines are. While that might not be APA format to have those the way the data paths are and the way the lines are, that's really not what we're looking for. Like I can clearly understand where the phase change line happened, even though the data path's not broken, even and APA says it should be. That's not really the point. The point is that we don't know what the red data path is. That's really the thing that we're most concerned about. So we know asking is going up. That's good, but we don't know what red is.
So thank you, Lucas. Appreciate that. And that is, I think we're moving on to the next slide, but
Yep.
that was, I believe, going to be Melantha's.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So this one is regarding Fidelity. And so this one is concerned with how do you know that what you have written in the plan can be implemented, will be implemented, and then if it's not implemented, what do you do about it? So the first component is having some specific instructions for how you're going to actually assess fidelity. Is that going to be a task list of all the things that implementers should be doing? How do you know that it's happening? What are the specific instructions to make sure that you're going to have high fidelity? Or if that you don't see high fidelity, what are you going to do about it? So is that going to be some sort of retraining? What are you going to do to train in the beginning to make sure that people can do it to start? And how are you going to communicate this to the rest of the team? So let's look at some examples and non-examples of kind of this element in action. Utilizing a set of steps for how to implement the BSP, and the analyst will observe staff and provide feedback. Any steps not observed or observed being conducted incorrectly will be practiced. So for this one, we see that there is, we don't know the specific steps, but we know there are steps. And again, this is a condensed form in a BSP, you have the full steps, but to make it fit on a screen in a paragraph, it's there's defined steps for how to implement the BSP. And the behavior analysts, when they're observing staff, they're going to be looking at that. Apologize for the typos in here. And then they're going to, if they see they're not happening, then they're going to call it out, provide performance feedback, and they're going to practice it. This also doesn't include communicating with the team. That should be in here, so apologize for that. But this has all those necessary components that we would need to know that it could happen, it is happening, and what we're going to do about it if it's not. And another example, if the analyst is conducting, or when the analyst is conducting their supervision, ongoing monitoring plan, staff will be asked to role play strategy in the BSP. So this might be one from a situation where you have multiple components within your behavior support plan, and you wouldn't expect to see every single part of that plan being implemented every single moment of the day. And so you go into the home, you do supervision, and you ask staff, role play this part of the plan with me. Then the behavior analyst looks at it, evaluates it on a task list, and then gives performance feedback based on it. And then missteps are going to be practiced until corrected. So again, there is a clear set of performance expectations for implementers that they're evaluated against. And the first one, it was just in the course of providing services. In this situation, it's in the course of asking somebody to kind of role play what they should do if that event happened, and then giving performance feedback and helping them to practice until they're able to successfully perform that task. So now let's transition to looking at a non-example. During the meetings with staff, the analyst will ask staff, hey, how's the plan going? You've been doing it? And if they say, yep, then they go, cool. And they mark that fidelity is high. So implementation fidelity is super high because staff said that they're doing it and they know how. So this, we have no set of clear expectations on what performances should or shouldn't be happening. We're not actually observing performances either in the situation or in a contrived like role play setting. So we're not actually seeing the performance happening, even in a contrived situation, and we aren't doing anything about it. So we have no performance feedback. This is just kind of like an after the fact check-in. This wouldn't be sufficient to know without reasonable doubt that the plan's being implemented as intended, or that staff even could implement if they were so inclined to. So this would be a non-example. And let's transition to a challenge question. So looking at this one, determine if you think this is an example or not. So the analyst will train the supervisor to conduct fidelity checks utilizing a task analysis and provide performance feedback. The analyst and supervisor will alternate days observing staff at least once a week to observe the same time. So don't consider the communication to the team in this one. Just think about in terms of, is there an explicit standard for implementation performance, and is there a specific plan to do something about it if it's not happening? So just considering those two things. Alrighty, it looks like we had about an even split of those that responded. About half of those that responded said, yes, it is an example, and about half said, no, it's not an example. This is, sorry, one second, got some pop-ups here. I would consider this to be an example because you have a task analysis of what staff are supposed to be doing. You provide performance feedback, and there is a system in place for how to ensure that fidelity is happening. So you've got the supervisor that's been trained on how to do it, how to check for fidelity. You've got the behavior analyst and the supervisor alternating when they're going to be doing fidelity checks. You've got some inner observer reliability happening because they are having times of the week that they're syncing up and making sure that they're continuing to observe the same way. And Allison, yes, absolutely. It doesn't include the communication ones. If you remember when I presented the challenge question, I told people to ignore that component and specifically look just to see if it had a specific performance criterion and a way to do something about it if that criterion wasn't met. So awesome. Okay. Melantha, it looks like you're back as a panelist. Would you like to do the last element?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, the last element of the checklist is describe specific strategies to promote generalization. And when you think about the components of that, specific strategies that promote generalization are present, such that typical stimuli exert control without the need of contrived stimuli, and strategies should also result in the maintenance of the behavior support plan effects. And so when I think about this, I think about replacement behaviors and a person being able to use their replacement behaviors in any environment with anyone. And so and so I'm going to go into the examples next. Okay, this is an exemplar. Staff will slowly introduce intermittent delays when responding to requests until it approximates the typical environment. And so when I think about this example, I think about a person who struggles to wait. And I think about everybody is placed in situations in which we have to wait, and sometimes the time varies. And so I think about even going into the grocery store, and they have at least 2 ways of which a person can check out. A person can go to the self-checkout line, and they still may have to wait because there may be a line, or they can wait in a longer line with the cashier. But both situations can present a delay in which a person is able to have their products wrung out and bagged and be done with the task. And so with this example, slowly allowing with this example, staff will slowly introduce intermittent delays, so slowly increasing the amount of time that the person has to wait on something prepares them for waiting in any environment, because we can hope that we know that the time in which we would have to wait on a person to respond, wait on a person to provide us with our requests, but those times vary. And so that's why that's a good example. Okay, this is another example. Carlos will learn to self-manage his daily tasks, including recording and graphing his own data. This is him being able to learn the skill of managing his own life, prepares him to be self-sufficient once the overseer of the behavior support plan, who's going to teach them the skills, is gone. And so this definitely ensures that the plan is in effect once the plan is no longer valid. And so this is another good example. Ready for the non-example. Okay. Once goals are met, the team will meet to discuss whether the BSP should be discontinued. And this is definitely, this is definitely not an example, and I'm going to allow you guys to chat in why this is a non-example, a non-exemplar. What's missing? Yes, Allison, there is just no plans for maintenance or generalization. Yes, zero criteria. No inclusion of the clients. Yes, you guys are. Yes, and what are the goals? Yes, these are great, great answers. All right, let's go ahead to the challenge question. When teaching communication, one simple one-word response will be taught for things like food, drink, break, and iPad. Is this exemplar or not? Is this a good example or not? All right. Look like time is up. It looked like the results indicate that the majority of the people said this is a non-example, and we have a few people highlight that it is. And so it is a non-example. One of the things that one of the things that stood out about this challenge question is one simple word, and will be taught for things like food or drink. And when we think about, when I think about language, there are so many ways in which a break can be, break has so many meanings and so many different ways in which it can be communicated. And the same thing with drink. I thought about, when I read the word drink, I thought about beverage, and then I thought about how some people call it a adult beverage. I think about when I think about taking a break could be a vacation for some, a holiday for others, going to smoke. For an employee, I'm going out to smoke, that means break. So a person being able to have to be able to communicate and understand the receptively and expressively being able to communicate one word in multiple ways is the best way I can communicate that. And so that's why this is not an example or an exemplar.
Another thing to think about, or some other things to think about with this particular element, and I actually like this element so much because it covers so much ground. And so, you know, when people say generalization, a lot of times we probably mean something like stimulus generalization or response generalization, and those are both pieces of it, but it's more than just that necessarily. So it's about how do we get somebody to be as successful as they are during treatment in a typical situation without the extra supports we put in place. So how do we get people to respond appropriately to the typical signs and signals that they would get throughout their day. How do we get them to have flexible ways to respond across situations that come up across their day so that they can be successful? So if I have a PEX device and it's broken today, what do I do until I can get the PEX device fixed? Like what are my alternative ways to communicate? Are there skills that I could learn that actually create additional opportunities to have reinforcement? Are they are like behavioral cusps or things that are kind of generative in the way that they're taught? So like problem solving, reading is one of those things. Reading and writing and communication, those are the things that open up a huge range of possibilities, provided you have the vocabulary, so you can make enough different verbal responses in order to continue to be successful. So this is really about how do you help somebody be successful in their typical settings and make sure they remain successful even whenever you take away those scaffolding pieces that you've put in place during treatment. So behavior service treatment shouldn't be forever. It's not a forever service. How do you help people be successful in their life? And so that's why I actually really like the example about the teaching somebody to do self-management, because it doesn't depend on a direct care staff person to implement forever. So the other thing is having a direct care staff person shouldn't be the goal for us to support somebody. So we should be aiming to help them be successful without direct care staff people, because that's a contrivance in their life. It's not typical that we have paid staff people that implement strategies on our behalf. And so that's one of those things where it's not just about, it can be stimulus generalization, it can be response generalization, but it also can be a combination of the two. It could be what Jolene would call like contingency adduction. So where you're trying to help people bring different repertoires together under a new context to create new behavior. So you're talking about getting that generative response or behavioral cusps that you're teaching a skill that opens up their world to them. So that's really what we're talking about here, is we're looking for, can we get a lot of bang for our buck, and can we get continued success even after the behavior support plan is no longer there? Okay, so we have just a few minutes left for questions. And so I want to open it up for people to ask questions now. We've got about 5 minutes until we are out of time. So we have plenty of time. And I think people need to enter their BACB stuff again so that we can get you to kind of sign out. And then we do have a question about labor versus life skills regarding chores. Okay, Julie, could you be a little bit more specific about your question regarding that? Okay, so Julie says, in a home, an adult is asked to do chores every day to maintain the group home. Well, is this appropriate to build skills? Well, I would say it depends on why you're helping them. So if you're primarily helping them to develop some self-care hygiene stuff so that they don't get like skin breakdown, like that's the primary purpose, then yeah, that might make sense. Like if maintaining the group home means keeping a clean and hygienic place. Now, if you're there to help with physical aggression, and you're helping them build skills to address those things, then I struggle to see the functional connection between doing chores. Now, I could see potentially a functional connection with being able to read and communicate really well to reducing the likelihood that somebody has aggression, because being able to read and write increases the ability for people to communicate in lots of different ways. And as most things in our lives are mediated through other people, being able to get things mediated through other people in multiple different ways is a really, really good way to be flexible and successful in different environments. Okay, I got you, Julie. I'll look at my email. Any other questions out there? Allison says she likes the statement contrived for situations where clients have staff. sometimes teams look at situations where kind of the problem behavior is no longer apparent, but the staff are still there as basically treatment's been successful, and the behavior analyst can kind of fade out. But there's so much more improved quality of life that can be done. Do we stay in for that? Well, that's I love that comment, Allison. And if I were providing treatment, that would be part of my goal for the client. Now, it's obviously the team and the individual's choice on how long they continue services, but as what I would be setting up for, you know, how I see treatment going until the point where I would feel like I need to fade out, I would be wanting to target the reduction in the need for the amount of staffing. Now, it could be that they really do have an ongoing need, and you're talking about a really long-term set of strategies to help them become less dependent on staffing. But we should be thinking about what would it take for them to not need the level of staffing that they have. What do they need to learn? So there's lots of things that people can learn to be more independent, which is the whole point of our service setting. Any more questions? I don't see any. Tammy asks, do people struggle with staff documenting interventions or appropriate askings, etc., or do you just document that on a visit? That is a good question. I would say that it's probably, and I'm happy to have other people chime in their thoughts about it. So do you have problem, you as when you're in your own professional practice, have problem with getting staff to document things or to do the intervention, and are you just looking for those things when you visit? And I would say that's probably a constant struggle, getting people to take data, getting people to document what they did. And but I'm anxious to hear what other people respond in. And while they respond in, I'll provide some thoughts. So yeah, I think that's why it's so important to have a really clear plan up front on how you're going to manage that. And that includes a couple things. So one, it includes judicious use of asking staff to do things. So if you need data collected, like, do you really need it? And if you really need it, then you need to make sure it happens. But sometimes we, as behavior analysts, we love data. And so we ask people to take lots of data and do lots of different things just because we really like to see it, but we don't really necessarily need it for the service. Or we fail to recognize that the agency's already taking data that's just about what we want, that we could kind of tag onto. So making sure that you're reducing the response effort for staff to implement, including documentation, is important because staff members or implementers are just like anybody else. They operate under the same behavioral principles that we do. So what can you do to increase their motivation or to help them discriminate when they should or shouldn't do something, and also make it reinforcing for doing the thing that they need to do to implement? And then the other thing is what is that thing they're going to do when they implement? So how can you help be reinforcing when you see the right things happening, but also even more importantly, how can you help somebody at the agency? So let's say we're talking about residential agency. How do we help identify somebody there that can be that coach when you're not there, that can provide those consequences, continue to set that contingency that if you implement correctly, then good things happen for you when you're not there. And so being able to have somebody that can act like that in that position, that coach position for you when you're not there, is going to be really, really helpful, especially if you're only there once a week. Yeah, so Allison mentioned staff. She hears from staff sometimes that they just will flat out refuse to take data. They're not going to implement because they have too much paperwork. The way that I try to approach that is I always try to see the truth in all things. And so when staff say they're not going to do it because they have too much work to do, that they probably do have a lot of stuff to do. And so again, I think sometimes when you just can try to find a balance between what you absolutely have to have and what you can not need at the moment, kind of helps set that. And then again, finding that person in the organization that can be that coach when you're not there. All right, we're at time. So it doesn't look like there are any outstanding questions, so we can go ahead and close it out there. Hopefully everybody's put in the chat box your name, email address, and BACB number, because we need that for the CEUs. Megan, I did not get back to your question about the extinction and the timeout for reinforcement. We can touch base offline if you want to talk about that. All right. Allison Buck has some questions. Go ahead and email that to us. I will put it in. Go ahead and email bsrc@dmh.mo.gov with questions, and we'll respond there because we're at time. I don't want to be respectful of everyone. So thanks for everyone for attending. Hopefully it was helpful. Stay tuned for the workshop upcoming.
Have a great